Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Paranoid Stories. Today, I am back with 10 true trucker horror stories. These narratives have been carefully crafted, drawing from the terrifying experiences of long-haul drivers, dispatchers, truck stop attendants, and others who claim to have witnessed things on the dark highways that should not exist. To protect the privacy of those involved, names and specific routes have been carefully altered while preserving the terrifying authenticity of each encounter. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Paranoid Stories for daily true horror content that will keep you questioning what lurks in the shadows. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when darkness descends upon our channel. Now let us begin our journey into the heart of highway terror. The first time I saw the truck, I was about 2 hours out of Chicago, coming up on Interstate 80 heading west. It was an old pickup, dark blue, so faded it looked almost gray in certain light. The kind of vehicle you'd see rusting in someone's driveway for years. It passed me going maybe 70, 75 miles per hour, and I remember thinking it was odd because the back end was torn up. The bumper hanging loose, the bed all dented and warped. But what really caught my attention was that there were no plates, not just dirty or obscured, just empty metal where the license should be. I didn't think much about it then. You see weird things on long hauls. I had music on, my thermos of coffee, and about 15 hours ahead of me. The truck disappeared into the dark and I kept my speed steady at 68 miles per hour. Around midnight, somewhere in Iowa, I saw it again. Same truck, same damage. This time it was ahead of me, maybe a quarter mile up the road, and it was moving slow, real slow, maybe 50 miles per hour. I thought about passing it, but something made me hesitate. I hung back and watched the taillights for a few miles. Then the truck accelerated suddenly, hit 80 in what felt like seconds, and pulled away until I lost sight of it in the darkness. I didn't see it again for an hour, and I'd almost convinced myself it was a different truck. But when it appeared in my mirror, I knew it wasn't. Same shape, same damage, same absence of any plate catching the light. This time it was behind me, maintaining distance, not gaining or falling back, just there. I sped up to 75 miles per hour. The truck matched it. I slowed to 60. It slowed too. After 10 minutes of this, I took an exit I hadn't planned on, small town I'd never heard of, and the truck didn't follow. I pulled into a gas station, sat in the parking lot with the engine off and tried to think about what I was doing. I wasn't tired. I wasn't hallucinating. It was the same truck. Same impossible truck with no plates appearing and disappearing like it was following some route I couldn't predict. I bought coffee I didn't need and got back on the highway. It was around 2 a.m. when I saw it the fourth time. I was in Nebraska by then, on a stretch of road that felt completely empty. No other cars, no lights except mine and the stars, just the flat expanse of nothing rolling past. The truck was alongside me in the left lane, matching my speed exactly. I could see the damage more clearly now in my headlights. The door panels were crushed in, as if something had hit it repeatedly from the inside. The windows were so dirty I couldn't see through them except for the driver's side, where there was a face I couldn't quite focus on. I slowed down. The truck slowed. I sped up. The truck sped up. Then it drifted back behind me again, maintaining a distance of maybe 50 yards. I told myself I should call someone, but call who? And say what? That a truck was following me? Plenty of trucks were on the highway at night. This one just happened to be going the same direction. By the time the fifth time happened, it was almost 4 a.m, and I was running on fumes and adrenaline. The truck came up behind me on a long, straight section of empty highway somewhere in Wyoming. I could see it in my mirror getting closer, the distance between us shrinking steadily. I gripped the wheel tighter and pressed down on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed 70, 80, 85 miles per hour. My delivery van wasn't made for this speed, and it was shaking. The truck stayed right there, never falling back, never losing ground. It was tailgating me now, close enough that I could see the full width of the truck bed. And in the passenger window there was something. Tall, loosely wrapped in white cloth that had darkened with age or stains or both. The shape wasn't quite human, but it was trying to be. It wasn't moving, but I felt like it was looking at me. Not the driver, not anyone in control of the truck. Just this wrapped, standing thing in the passenger seat, facing directly toward my car. Don't know what I did then. I think I swerved. I think I hit the brakes. My hands went cold. My breathing had gotten shallow, like I couldn't quite get air in. When I looked back in the mirror, the truck was gone. Just empty highway behind me, the road stretching back into darkness with nothing on it. I made it to Denver at sunrise. I delivered the supplies, parked my van, and sat in the lot for an hour not moving. The drive back isn't for another 4 days. I still haven't decided if I'm taking it. I've been driving a truck for 14 years, and I'm not the kind of guy who spooks easy. But I need to tell someone what happened 3 months ago at a stop outside Winnemucca, Nevada, because I still can't make sense of it. I pulled into that truck stop around 2 in the afternoon. Nothing special about it. The usual cluster of pumps, the diner, the lot full of rigs. I'd been on the road for 16 hours straight, and my beard was getting thick enough that it was starting to itch against my neck. I grabbed my shaver from the cab and sat on the edge of my bunk, looking into that small mirror I keep mounted on the wall of the sleeper. It's one of those cheap vanity mirrors, maybe 6 inches across, the kind you find in any truck stop pharmacy. The thing is, the reflection was wrong from the start. I noticed it right away, but didn't think much of it at first. The image was delayed, not by seconds, by hours. I could tell because I was looking at myself as I must have appeared that morning, back when I was somewhere around Utah. The landscape behind my reflection wasn't the truck stop. It was empty highway, gray and flat, stretching into nothing. No vehicles, no mile markers, just asphalt disappearing into a kind of fog I didn't remember seeing that morning. I kept shaving anyway. My hands were steady. The reflection watched me work the razor down my jaw, and it was calm, methodical, like watching footage from earlier in the day. Except the fog seemed to be getting thicker in the mirror. The road behind my reflected shoulder was becoming less distinct, like visibility was dropping. I was thinking maybe it was just something wrong with the mirror, a defect, or some trick with the angle and the light in the cab. That's what I told myself to keep going. By the time I was finishing up, just the last bit under my chin, the reflection had changed again. The landscape had shifted. Now I was seeing something that looked like late evening, but I couldn't figure out where. No road at all now. Just this gray, desolate expanse of nothing. Dirt maybe, or old asphalt worn down to bare ground. The fog was so thick the background was almost invisible. And I realized the image in the mirror wasn't showing me where I'd been. It was showing me where I was going. I should have put the mirror down then, I know that now. But I didn't. I tilted it slightly, trying to see more of what was behind me in that reflection, trying to understand what the hell I was looking at. And that's when I saw it. There was a face pressed against the window of my cab. Not my reflection, something else. Something with features that didn't sit right on a human skull, stretched too long, the jaw extending down and forward in a way that made my brain stall trying to process it. The eyes were wide and fixed directly at me, not at my reflection, but at me, and they were aware. Conscious? interested. My hands moved before I decided to move them. I dropped the mirror. It hit the floor of the cab and cracked, a spiderweb fracture right across the surface. When I spun around to look at the actual window next to me, there was nothing there, just the parking lot, a couple of cars, a guy walking toward the diner. The window was completely empty. I sat in that cab for probably 5 minutes without moving. My breathing wasn't normal. It was coming in short bursts, and I had to force myself to slow it down. I kept telling myself it was a hallucination, that I'd been driving too long, that I needed sleep. But I knew what I'd seen in that mirror. The face had been in the reflection, not behind me, which didn't make any sense unless the mirror was showing me something other than the space directly behind the cab. I picked up the mirror. The crack made it hard to see clearly, but I looked into it again anyway. This time, all I saw was the cab reflected back at me. Present day, my current face, looking exhausted and pale. The landscape was normal. The fog was gone. I'm still driving the same routes. I pass that truck stop sometimes, and I never stop anymore. Last week, I saw someone at the fuel pumps looking into a small mirror, tilting it like they were trying to see something behind them. I had to keep driving. I don't know what that mirror shows or where it's showing. I just know I'm never going to look into it again. It was a Tuesday, middle of the afternoon. Nothing unusual about the day. I'd picked up a trailer loaded with freight, pulled it out to the warehouse facility on the edge of town. Standard procedure. I backed up to the dock, extended the landing gear, lowered it down until the trailer weight settled on the dolly. You know, the mechanical legs that support the rig when it's detached. Heavy steel, hydraulic operated. The whole process takes maybe 10 minutes. Once I had it positioned and locked down, I disconnected the airlines, the electrics, pulled my tractor out smooth and headed to the fuel station about a mile away, grabbed some coffee, checked my messages, probably took an hour total, nothing that mattered. I headed back to the warehouse like I always do. You have to return the tractor to the yard before the shift ends. As I'm pulling up to the lot, I'm looking ahead to confirm the trailer's still there, still where I left it. That's just habit. Check on your load. Make sure nothing happened while you were gone. The trailer was there, but something was wrong with it. I couldn't quite process what I was seeing at first. I drove closer, slower. The trailer looked tilted somehow, but not tilted. The landing gear wasn't underneath it. The whole massive box, we're talking about 25 tons of steel and freight, was hovering, literally hovering, just inches above the pavement. I stopped my tractor, turned off the engine. I sat there for maybe a full minute just looking at it. The trailer was suspended, not resting on anything. The dolly, the landing gear, all the hydraulic support, it was completely retracted, folded up underneath, but the trailer itself wasn't resting on it or on the ground. There was this narrow gap between the bottom of the cargo box and the pavement. I could see daylight through it. My first thought was that I was misunderstanding what I was looking at. Maybe the lighting was playing tricks. But then I noticed the pavement directly beneath the trailer. The asphalt was compressed, slightly, but visibly. There was a faint rectangular depression under the entire footprint of the trailer, like the weight was there pressing down, but whatever was supporting it was holding steady. I got out of the tractor, walked over. My chest felt tight, and I remember thinking that was odd because I shouldn't have been afraid yet. I just didn't understand what I was looking at. I crouched down and looked under the trailer. Completely empty space, no support, no mechanism I didn't know about. The landing gear was retracted into its stored position. The trailer was just floating there. I walked around the entire perimeter. Same thing everywhere. An inch, maybe an inch and a half of empty space between the metal chassis and the ground. The depression in the asphalt was real. I could feel it with my hand, a shallow dip that followed the weight distribution of the trailer. But there was nothing holding it up. My hand started shaking. Not the kind of shaking you notice right away. It was a tremor in my fingers first, then it worked its way up my arms. My breathing got shallow. I had to sit down on the curb for a minute. I looked around the lot. Nobody else was there. No other drivers, no dock workers, nothing. Just me and this trailer that was violating everything I understood about how things work. I called the warehouse manager, Derek. I said, "Hey, something's wrong with trailer 749er. You need to come look at it." He asked what was wrong. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane, so I just said there was a problem with the landing gear and asked him to come out. Derek came out with another guy, maintenance or something. They looked at it. Derek's face went the same color as mine probably was. He walked underneath it. The other guy did too. They were quiet for a while. Derek said, "I don't know what's happening here." That's all he said. The maintenance guy started checking the hydraulic connections, the electrical systems. Everything checked out. Everything was functioning normally. The gear was just retracted. The trailer was just suspended. We never figured out an explanation. By the next morning, it was normal again. The trailer had settled onto the gear like it always should have been. I checked the landing gear myself. No mechanical failure, no damage. Nothing that would indicate anything unusual had occurred. I've never told the other drivers what I saw. What's the point? I wouldn't believe it either if I were hearing it from someone else. It was back in March. I was headed northeast through Montana with a load of auto parts. Nothing urgent, just a standard run. Weather forecast was clear when I left, but you know how that goes out there. Conditions change in an hour. Around 2 in the morning, visibility just disappeared. I couldn't see the road markers anymore, and I could feel my rig starting to slide whenever I touched the brakes. There were already 4 or 5 other trucks parked on the shoulder, so I pulled in behind them and decided to wait it out in the sleeper cab. This happens. You sit tight, the storm passes, you keep moving. I have a nice setup in the back. Not fancy, but comfortable enough. Mattress, some shelves, a small heater. I pulled the curtain between the sleeper and the cab and got settled. The wind was absolutely relentless, making this high-pitched whistling sound where it hit the trailer. I don't remember taking my boots off. I just collapsed, exhausted. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when something woke me. Not a sound exactly, more like a vibration. My eyes snapped open in the dark, and that's when I heard it. Breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, directly above my head, labored, like someone was struggling for air through congested lungs. I froze. My first thought was that someone had climbed up on top of the cab, that maybe another driver was sick or in trouble. But the breathing was coming from inside the cab. Muffled, like it was behind something, but unmistakably close. Inches from my face, separated only by the foam ceiling liner. I didn't move. I couldn't move. I just lay there listening to this wet, rhythmic sound, trying to figure out what I was hearing. The breathing shifted. I swear I could hear it moving, repositioning itself slightly, and the sound changed pitch, deeper, like whatever it was had settled into a more comfortable position. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. The ceiling above the sleeper isn't solid. There's a gap there, a compartment. I'd never thought about it much before. I assumed it was just dead space between the roof and the interior lining, maybe a foot deep at most, something for insulation or wiring. I never needed to think about it. But something was in there, something alive. My hand started shaking. I couldn't control it. I told myself it was probably just an animal, a raccoon or something that had gotten in somehow, Maybe while the truck was parked at a depot. Raccoons make noise. They breathe weird. But I knew that wasn't right. The breathing was too deliberate, too conscious, and it was too big. A raccoon wouldn't fit in that space and move around like this. There wasn't enough room. I lay there in complete silence, trying to breathe as quietly as I could. The wind kept screaming outside, and that thing kept breathing above me. The sound kept changing. Wet inhalations, then long exhalations. Every few minutes it would shift position and the whole dynamic would change. I could almost track where it was in that narrow space. Hours passed like that. Or maybe it was minutes and it just felt like hours. I'd never been so aware of time passing. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. The cab would rock slightly whenever a particularly violent gust hit us, and I'd brace myself for whatever might happen, but nothing did. It just kept breathing. Around what I thought was 4 in the morning, I forced myself to move, slowly. I reached for my phone on the shelf next to the bunk, keeping my movements deliberate, trying not to make the truck shake. I had 3% battery. The signal out there was terrible. I got 1 bar, just barely enough. I was going to call someone, tell them I needed help getting to a town, anything to get out of that cab. But I didn't make the call. I don't know why. Partly it was knowing that even if someone could reach me, they'd have to drive through that snowstorm, and I didn't want that on me. But mostly it was the thought of drawing attention to this, of saying out loud that something was wrong while it was still there, still in that space above my head. Something about that felt dangerous. I put the phone down. The breathing continued. When the sky finally started to lighten around 6:30, the thing went quiet. Not a sound, not even movement. I waited another hour before I carefully, slowly climbed out of the bunk and made my way up to the cab. I started the engine. The snow had stopped. Other trucks were already pulling back onto the highway. I drove for 2 hours before I pulled into a rest stop and got out to check the roof. I climbed up there and looked at that foam ceiling panel and the gap above it. Nothing. No signs of anything ever being in there. No tracks, no debris, nothing. It was empty. Just that narrow space between the roof and the liner, maybe 14 inches of empty space. I've driven that route 6 times since then. Every single time I haul a load through Montana, I feel that same tension in my chest as I'm setting up to sleep, that same listening. And I haven't heard it again. But sometimes I wonder if it's because it's not there anymore, or because it's learned not to make a sound. I've been driving warehouse deliveries for 17 years, and I've never called out, never questioned a manifest, never done anything except exactly what the paperwork told me to do. So when I say something felt wrong about that last delivery, understand I'm not prone to exaggeration. The address came through around 11 at night. Industrial materials, heavy stuff, going to what the system flagged as a new construction site about 40 minutes outside the city. I plugged the coordinates into my GPS, grabbed my thermos and started driving. Nothing unusual. I was tired but not exhausted. A normal night on what should have been my last run before clocking out. Except the GPS started losing signal about 10 miles from the destination. The road got worse. Less asphalt, more gravel, then dirt. I kept following the GPS line on my phone screen because that's what you do. You follow instructions. That's the job. Eventually the trees opened up to a clearing and there was a temporary sign nailed to a post. Just an address. No company name. No project identifier. Nothing. The clearing was small, maybe the size of a parking lot, surrounded by trees that seemed to press in from all sides, and in the center of it was the hole. I need to be clear about this because it matters. It wasn't a typical construction site hole. Those are usually irregular, excavated in sections, bordered by equipment and warning tape. This was perfect, perfectly circular. Maybe 30 feet across, and I couldn't see the bottom. The sides weren't rough earth. They looked smooth, almost machined, like someone had drilled into the ground with precision. There was a single work light mounted on a metal stand at the edge, the kind you see at night construction sites, and it was pointing straight down into the hole. The light seemed to get swallowed. It didn't illuminate depth. It just disappeared into the dark about 30 feet down, and then there was nothing but black. I sat in the cab for a while. My hands were on the steering wheel, and I was thinking about calling dispatch, asking if this was legitimate. But I didn't. I don't know why. There was no rational reason not to. I just didn't. The manifest was still in my hand. I read it again. Deposit load here. That was it. No dock number, no receiving contact, nothing else. The cargo was industrial grade. Heavy materials, expensive stuff, the kind of thing you'd need machinery to unload normally, but the instruction was clear. Deposit here. I got out of the cab. The air was wrong somehow, not cold exactly, but the temperature felt inconsistent, like different pockets of air at different warmths. The work light hummed, this low electrical frequency that seemed to bypass my ears and vibrate in my chest instead. I stood there looking at that hole, and I felt something I don't have a better word for than pulled, like the hole had weight, like it was drawing my attention down and in, and that attention felt good, felt right even. I unlatched the trailer almost without thinking about it. My body was moving while my mind was a step behind, watching myself do this, questioning it, but not stopping it. The cargo was already bundled on pallets, secured with cargo straps. I found the hydraulic lever in the trailer hitch and released it. The trailer bed tilted up slowly and the materials began to shift. I remember the sound of the first pallet hitting the edge of the hole, this solid, heavy impact, and then the weight of it tipping forward, and then nothing. No crash, no sound of impact from the bottom. The pallet just fell into the dark and the darkness took it, and that was it. I pushed the hydraulic lever again, and another pallet tilted, slid, fell, then another. Each one disappeared into that smooth, cylindrical black, and with each one I felt something in my chest settle. Relax, like I was completing something. Like this was the only reason I'd been on that road at that hour in that truck with that cargo. The last pallet went down, and the trailer bed came back to horizontal. Empty. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. It was something else. Something like relief, completion, rightness. I walked back to the cab without looking at the hole again, though part of me wanted to. I wanted to stand at the edge and listen. Listen to what? I don't know. I drove back toward the city on the same dirt road, and somewhere around mile 15 my phone signal came back, and everything felt normal again. My hands steadied, my breathing felt right. But there was this strange, hollow feeling in my chest, like I'd finished something that had been incomplete, except I couldn't remember it ever being incomplete. I never filed a completion report. I went home, slept for 10 hours, and called in sick the next day. I've been trying to find information about that site, but there's nothing. No construction projects listed at that address. No company names, no permits. It's like it doesn't exist, like I imagined the whole thing, except I know I didn't. I was picking up a standard load, electronic components, circuit boards, the kind of stuff I haul twice a week. The facility is massive, maybe 15 stories, and I'd been there dozens of times before. That day was supposed to be routine. I pulled into the dock around 2 in the afternoon, got my paperwork sorted, and they directed me to the warehouse manager's office on the 12th floor. Here's where it gets specific. They told me to use the freight elevator on the east side, the big one, industrial grade, the kind designed for pallets and machinery. I remember the manager specifically saying I had to use that one because the main elevators were being serviced. I didn't think anything of it. I'd used that elevator before. I stepped inside. It was one of those old models, the kind with steel walls and a mechanical button panel. The doors closed, and I pressed 12. The elevator lurched upward, and I was standing there in that metal box thinking about nothing in particular. I was tired. I'd been on the road since 4 a.m. Then it stopped. Not smoothly. It just stopped. Mid-motion. I felt the slight jolt, and then nothing. The elevator just hung there between floors. I waited maybe 10 seconds before pressing the button again. Nothing happened. I pressed it a few more times. Still nothing. Then I looked at the light panel. The light started flickering, not dramatically, just a slow, rhythmic dimming and brightening. Yellow fluorescent light pulsing against the steel walls. I stood there watching it, waiting for the backup power to kick in or for someone to open the doors from outside. I wasn't scared yet. Elevators get stuck. It happens. When the light stabilized and came back on fully, I turned to face the doors so I could be ready to step out. That's when I noticed the walls. They were covered. The side panels of the elevator, the ones you don't usually pay attention to, were completely covered in marks. Hundreds of them. They looked like fingernail scratches at first, thin, desperate lines scored into the steel. But as I looked closer, I realized they weren't scratches. They were smears. Like someone had dragged their fingers across the wall over and over, leaving marks behind. I moved closer. The marks had texture. They were tacky, almost sticky to the touch, even though they'd obviously been there for a while. I recognized the substance immediately because I've had it on my hands every single day for nearly a decade. It was grease. Heavy diesel grease. The kind that builds up on your palms and under your fingernails when you work trucks. Some of the smears were darker than others, like it had been reapplied layer after layer. And as I looked at the panel more carefully, I could see individual handprints, large handprints, male handprints, trucker hands. My breathing changed. I became aware of it. The rhythm of my own breathing suddenly felt wrong, like I had to consciously remember how to do it. I looked at the floor. Clean. I looked at the ceiling. The ventilation grate was sealed tight. The buttons on the panel were untouched, normal. But those walls were a record of something. Someone in this box, pressing their hands against the steel over and over, hands covered in grease, a trucker's hands, desperate hands. The elevator lurched again and started moving. It took maybe 20 seconds to reach the 12th floor. The doors opened. I didn't move for several seconds. I just stood there in that box, staring at those handprints before I forced myself to step out. I completed the pickup. I didn't mention it to anyone. What was I going to say? When I got back to my truck, I sat in the cab for a long time before I could bring myself to drive. My hands wouldn't stop moving. I kept flexing my fingers, looking at my palms, at the dark crescents of grease under my nails. I've tried to research it. I called the facility twice, asking vague questions about maintenance issues with the East Freight elevator. The manager I spoke to didn't seem to know what I was talking about. He said they didn't have a problem with that elevator. I asked if there had ever been an incident, someone trapped, something like that. He got quiet for a moment and said he'd been there for 8 years and had never heard of anything like that. I don't drive through Tennessee anymore if I can help it. But last week I got a load assignment for that same facility. I sat in my truck for 40 minutes before I drove back out of that parking lot. I didn't get out of the cab. I still don't know what I saw in that elevator, and I don't know who left those marks. I just know that whatever happened in there, someone like me, left a record written in the only substance they had on their hands. 3 weeks ago, I had a routine haul down to a manufacturing plant outside Valdosta, Georgia. Machine parts. 4 pallets of precision-cut steel components going to some aerospace supplier. The manifest was clean, the load was secured properly, and I'd made the drive a dozen times before. Nothing about this run felt different when I left the depot that morning. I got to the facility around 2 in the afternoon. The receiving dock was empty except for one guy in a high-visibility vest, clipboard in hand. Standard setup. I backed in, popped the trailer, and he came up to check the paperwork while I got ready to unload. Here's where it gets strange. I went into the trailer to pull the first pallet and I grabbed the one nearest the door. Makes sense, right? Except when I got it onto the dock and the foreman scanned the label, he nodded and said, "That's the one," like he'd been expecting exactly that pallet. I looked at my manifest. The pallet I'd just pulled wasn't listed. I mean, it had the right shipping label format, the right company codes, even the right weight classification. But the serial number didn't match anything on my paperwork. I told him there must be a mistake, that this wasn't part of my load. He looked at me like I was being difficult. "This is what we ordered," he said, tapping his own clipboard. "Came in on the requisition 3 days ago." I pulled out my phone and photographed his paperwork. The purchase order number matched mine. The delivery date matched. But the components listed were the ones on this mystery pallet, not the 4 I'd loaded that morning in Atlanta. "Look," I said, "I've got 4 other pallets back there that match my manifest exactly. Those are what I'm supposed to deliver." He walked to the trailer with me. I showed him the other 4 pallets, still strapped and wrapped, labels pristine. He scanned one, then another. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. He went very still. "These aren't on the order," he said quietly. I pulled up my manifest on my phone, showed him the photos I'd taken at loading. He looked at them for a long time, then looked back at the pallets. When he met my eyes again, his face was blank in a way that made my stomach drop. "We can't accept these," he said. "They're not in our system." "They're the whole reason I'm here," I said, and I could hear my voice getting tight. "I loaded them 6 hours ago. I have documentation. I have a bill of lading with signatures." He shook his head. "I'm showing receipt of 1 pallet, the one you already unloaded. That's what we were expecting, and that's what we're signing for. The rest needs to go back with you." I tried calling my dispatcher. Voicemail. I tried the depot supervisor. Voicemail. I stood there in that empty lot with 4 pallets of machine parts that suddenly didn't exist in anyone's system except mine, and 1 pallet I'd never loaded sitting on the dock like it had always been there. The foreman was watching me, not impatient, not annoyed, just waiting. "I need to figure this out," I said. "I can't just take these back without authorization." "Then wait here," he said. "I'll process the pallet we received." He walked into the building. I stood there next to my trailer looking at those 4 identical pallets. I checked the labels again. I checked my photos. Everything matched. The pallets were real. The weight was right. The wrapping hadn't been tampered with. I pulled out the strapping knife and cut into one. The components inside matched the manifest description exactly. Precision-cut steel, aerospace grade, each piece labeled and cushioned. Thousands of dollars in parts that, according to everyone but me, weren't supposed to be there. The foreman came back with a signature pad. "We're all set," he said. "You're good to go." "What about these?" I gestured at the 4 pallets. "Return to sender," he said. "Not our problem." I signed. I don't know why. Maybe because he was so calm about it. Maybe because every call I tried to make went to voicemail. Maybe because the sun was starting to sink and I didn't want to be there after dark. I loaded the 4 pallets back into the trailer. The foreman watched from the dock, still holding his clipboard. As I climbed into the cab, I saw him make a check mark on his paperwork. One smooth, efficient motion. I called the depot again on the drive back. This time someone answered. I explained what happened. There was a long pause. Then the supervisor said they'd look into it and told me to return the load to the warehouse. When I got back that night, I backed into the bay and opened the trailer. The 4 pallets were gone. The straps were still there, cut ends coiled on the floor. But the pallets were gone. I filed a report. I showed them the photos. They checked the security cameras, but the footage from inside the trailer was corrupted, just static. The supervisor said they'd investigate, but his tone told me he thought I'd screwed up somewhere. I pulled my phone records. Every call I'd made from that facility showed in my log, but the depot line had no record of receiving them. I've been hauling freight for 6 years. I know how logistics work. I know how cargo moves through the system. But I delivered something I never loaded, and what I did load vanished like it was never there. The manifest I photographed that morning is still on my phone, but when I tried to access the digital copy from the depot server, it showed a different load entirely. The 1 pallet. The one they received. 3 weeks ago, I pulled into this truck stop outside Laramie around 2 in the morning. There were maybe 5 other rigs scattered across the lot, all dark, all silent. I did my pre-sleep walk-around like always. Checked the tandems, the airlines, the door seals. Everything looked fine. I climbed back into the cab, set my alarm for 8 hours, and crashed. I woke up maybe 4 hours later to this sound. At first I thought it was wind, or maybe a bad bearing somewhere in the lot. High-pitched, thin, like metal flexing under too much weight. It was faint enough that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it, but it kept going. Consistent, rhythmic almost. I lay there in the dark for maybe 10 minutes before I realized it was coming from my own trailer. I got dressed and went outside. The lot was still dead. No movement, no other drivers stirring. I walked along the passenger side of my rig with my flashlight, checking the airlines again, the brake drums, listening. The sound was there, but I couldn't pin it down. It seemed to shift as I moved, like it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Then I crouched down next to the rear tandems, and that's when I heard it clearly. It wasn't mechanical. It was singing. I know how that sounds. I do. But I'm telling you, it was voices. Human voices. High and distant and layered over each other like a choir buried underwater. The sound was coming from inside the tires themselves, not the wheel wells, not the hubs. The rubber, like something was trapped in there, compressed into that black, dense space, and it was singing. I stood up too fast and had to steady myself against the trailer. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. I told myself it was the cold or exhaustion or maybe carbon monoxide from someone's engine idling nearby, but I knew that wasn't it. I pressed my ear against the side of the tire, and the sound got clearer. Mournful. Pleading. There were words in there, I think, but I couldn't make them out. Just the tone. Just the desperation. I backed away and checked the other tires. All 8 of them. Every single one had that same sound coming from inside, slightly different pitches, slightly different rhythms, but all of them singing. I thought about calling someone, dispatch, a mechanic, hell, even the cops. But what was I supposed to say? That my tires were haunted? Here's the thing. I still had 600 miles left on my route. I had a delivery window I couldn't miss, and the tires weren't flat. The air pressure was fine. There was no mechanical reason not to drive. So I did. I climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and pulled out of that lot. For the first hour, I kept the radio off. The windows cracked, just listening. The singing didn't stop. It changed, though. As the wheels turned, the pitch shifted, rising and falling like the voices were being pulled in different directions. At highway speed, it became this awful, droning hum that I could feel in my chest, in my teeth. I tried to focus on the road. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of acoustic phenomenon, air pockets in the rubber resonating at just the right frequency. Maybe I was losing my mind. But every time I slowed down for a curve or a toll booth, the hum would break apart again into those distinct, overlapping voices, and I'd hear it clear as anything. I made the delivery. I unhooked the trailer at the warehouse and drove the cab to a shop I know in Pennsylvania. I told the guy I needed a full tire inspection, all of them replaced if there was any question. He looked at me like I was nuts, but he did it. When he pulled the first tire off, I watched through the garage window, holding my breath, waiting for something to fall out, waiting for proof. There was nothing, just normal wear, normal tread. He said they were fine, another 20,000 miles easy, but I told him to replace them anyway. All of them. He charged me a fortune, but I didn't care. The new tires are silent. I haven't told anyone else about this. I still drive the same routes, still pull into that same truck stop sometimes when I'm desperate for sleep, but I always park on the opposite end now, and I never ever crouch down next to my wheels anymore. I don't want to know if it's back. I've been hauling freight down Louisiana's back roads for 20 years, and I know the bayou like the veins in my own arm. It's a place that doesn't forgive mistakes, where the water hides things that would make a person question their sanity. That night, though, it caught me off guard. I was east of Houma, pushing my truck through a drizzle that had been hitting the windshield for miles. The radio was crackling with static, a Cajun station fading in and out with Zydeco beats that did nothing to break the monotony. Then it hit. Not a storm, but a downpour, like the sky had opened up and dumped the entire Gulf right on top of me. Visibility dropped to zero. Windshield wipers slapped uselessly against the rain, blurring the road ahead into a sheet of gray. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I couldn't keep driving, too dangerous with the pipe load in the trailer. Up ahead, a narrow gravel shoulder rose slightly along the embankment. I eased the 18-wheeler onto it, tires crunching over shells and mud. I killed the headlights to save the battery and sat listening to the rain pound the truck cab like 1,000 hammers. The bayou stretched out on both sides, black and endless under the storm. Water pooled on the road, inches deep and swirling with debris. I checked my phone. No signal, of course. Out here, you're completely alone. I leaned back, rubbed my eyes, and tried to wait out the storm. 10 minutes, maybe 20. That's when I saw the lights. At first I thought it was a trick of the rain, reflections or a distant vehicle. But no, they were out in the swamp, maybe a quarter-mile away, moving through the cypress trees and tangled vines. Flickers, low to the ground, not steady like beams, but scattered like fireflies. Dozens of them, moving slowly toward the road. I squinted through the glass, wiping condensation with my sleeve. Not headlights, too dim, too spread out. The water was rising. I could hear it lapping against the tires like a tide creeping up a beach. The shoulder wasn't as high as I'd thought. I shifted in my seat, a chill running up my neck. Those lights weren't fading. They were getting closer, weaving through the undergrowth. I turned the key, headlights back on, cutting through the downpour. The beam swept the swamp, showing wet tree trunks and hanging moss. Nothing. just rain and shadows. But the lights continued, closer now, maybe 100 yards away. I counted them, 20, 30 pinpricks glowing against the darkness. My mouth went dry. What could they be? Not poachers, not alligators. I laughed nervously, but the sound died quickly. The truck rocked slightly as water pushed against the underside. I glanced down, 6 inches on the road now, murky and foaming. They emerged from the trees then, spreading onto the roadside. Not lights, eyes, hundreds of them, reflecting yellow and green, unblinking in the rain. Low-bodied creatures slithering through the flood. Snakes. Not just a few, hordes of them. Cottonmouths and water moccasins pouring from the swamp, drawn by something. My heart pounded hard. The road around the truck came alive with them, coils twisting over the asphalt, sliding past the tires, some thick as my arm, others thin and whip-like, all moving with the same slow purpose. Water carried them closer, pushing them until they climbed the running boards, probing under the truck. I didn't scream, didn't make a sound. I sat frozen as the first snake slithered up the hood, leaving a trail of water. Its eyes locked with mine for a moment. Then another came, and another, until the windshield was covered in a moving pattern of scales and stairs. By dawn, I reached dry pavement near the interstate, soaked through, hands still shaking. The weather report called it a freak storm, nothing more. But I know better. Out in the bayou, things don't always stay hidden, and sometimes when the water rises, it brings company you can't outrun. I've checked the truck twice since, under the seats, in the vents, but every shadow makes me look twice. The road's quiet now, but on still nights, I swear I hear that water lapping against the tires. The truck's engine rumbled to a stop, its low growl too loud in the empty night. I killed the ignition and rubbed my eyes. Victor Morales, 15-year long-haul driver, and this was my first midnight cargo inspection on a route like this. Dispatch called an hour earlier about some routine check on an interstate shipment. No big deal, but the loading dock was in the middle of nowhere, a forgotten industrial wasteland off the highway. Chain-link fence topped with razor wire, sodium lights buzzing overhead like angry insects. Diesel and damp concrete filled the air, with only the distant highway hum breaking the silence. I climbed out of the cab, boots crunching gravel, and locked the door out of habit. The trailer was sealed tight, manifest clipped to my clipboard. 50 custom caskets for eternal rest, all empty, headed to their upstate warehouse. High-end stuff, polished mahogany and oak, silk-lined interiors that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'd loaded them that morning, stacking them neatly, secured with straps. No shifting, no noise, just wood and quiet. The inspector was late. I paced the dock, checking my watch under the harsh light. 12:15. No phone signal out here, and an uneasy feeling crept up my spine. Then I heard it, a faint tap, like something softly touching the trailer's metal side. Cargo settling, I thought. These wooden boxes were heavy, and trailers get bumpy. I walked closer, pressed my ear against the cool aluminum. Tap, tap, tap. Faint, irregular. Nothing to worry about. But the sound didn't stop. Minutes passed and it grew sharper, pulling me back. I lit a cigarette, leaning against the trailer. The smoke curled up, and that's when the rhythm started. 3 distinct knocks, slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Then again. Not random anymore. Like someone testing a door from the inside, but measured, almost polite. And it moved, starting low near the rear wheels, then shifting forward, echoing from what felt like the second row of caskets. I froze, cigarette burning my fingers. The ash fell, but I didn't move. Hands shaking, I pulled out the manifest again, shining my phone's light on it. Empty containers, signed by the foreman. No passengers, no extras. I'd seen the factory floor, rows of gleaming boxes, lids open. But this was different. The knocking repeated, 3 by 3, traveling toward the front of the trailer, like something was walking from one box to the next. I had to check. The inspector hadn't arrived, and waiting felt worse than knowing. I grabbed bolt cutters from under the seat and cut the lock on the rear doors. The chain fell loudly to the ground. Heart pounding, I opened the doors slightly. Darkness inside, smelling of fresh wood. I switched on my phone's flashlight, sweeping it across the stacks. The caskets looked untouched, polished surfaces catching the light, lids closed, empty according to the manifest. But the knocking was closer now, 3 sharp raps from the nearest walnut casket with brass fittings. My light trembled on the wood. No marks. I reached out, fingers hovering, feeling the chill radiating from it. The trailer's air felt thick, stagnant. "Anyone in there?" My voice cracked. Stupid question. No answer, just the persistent knock, knock, knock. It paused, then moved. Soft vibrations under my hand as the sound shifted to the next casket. I yanked the lid up. Empty. Silk lining, perfect. But the knocking continued, jumping to another box with 3 deliberate beats. Sweat beaded on my forehead. I slammed the lid shut and backed out, closing the doors. I wedged a pallet against the handles, weak, but it would hold. Pacing, I lit another cigarette with unsteady hands. What was happening? Rats? No. Too rhythmic. Road echoes. We'd been stopped too long. The knocking spread across the trailer, 3 from the rear, 3 from the middle, 3 from the front. A synchronized chorus. I pressed against the cab door, staring at the trailer. The wood gleamed innocently, but each knock pulled at my gut. Dispatch finally crackled on the radio. Inspector delayed. "Forget it," I muttered. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and drove. The trailer swayed, the knocking fading into the road's hum. Or so I thought. On the highway, it returned. Softer, but there, 3 knocks vibrating through the floor, moving from back to front like settling in for the ride. I gripped the wheel, cranked the radio to drown it out. By dawn, I'd convinced myself it was road fatigue. A week later, Eternal Rest's stock crashed. Complaints about caskets with imperfections, whispers of something trapped during construction. Drivers who'd hauled those routes quit. I still drive, but not those loads. Manifests get double-checked now. And at night in the quiet apartment, I sometimes hear it. 3 soft knocks, waiting, moving closer.